I've always had a fascination with caves. The idea of stepping into the Earth's veins, exploring what lies beneath our feet, felt almost sacred to me. So when I heard about Hollow Ridge Cave, an unmarked cavern hidden deep in the forest, I couldn't resist. Local legends called it the Lost Cave and warned of a curse, but I brushed it off as small-town superstition. The hike to the entrance was longer than I expected, the trail winding through dense trees that seemed to close in around me. By the time I reached the cave, the sun was already dipping behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. I stood at the gaping mouth of the cavern, its jagged edges like teeth, and felt a strange chill creep down my spine. For a moment, I considered turning back. But then I laughed at myself. "It's just a cave," I whispered. The air changed as soon as I stepped inside. It was cooler, damp, and carried an earthy smell that clung to my nostrils. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing walls glistening with moisture. My boots echoed with every step, the sound bouncing back at me in distorted, fragmented whispers. I told myself it was just the acoustics, but it still made my stomach twist. A few minutes in, I noticed the carvings. Symbols etched into the walls, crude and ancient-looking. They weren't the kind of markings you'd expect from bored teenagers. They felt purposeful, like they were meant to keep something out, or in. I ran my fingers over one of the carvings. The grooves were deep, jagged, as if made by claws rather than tools. "Weird," I muttered, snapping a quick photo with my phone. My flashlight flickered, just for a second, and I froze. The cave was silent, almost unnaturally so. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I shook off the unease and pressed on, my curiosity outweighing my nerves. That's when I heard it. A faint drip of water at first, rhythmic and steady. But then, something else. A shuffle. Like someone or something was moving deeper inside the cave. "Hello?" My voice echoed back, sounding much smaller than I expected. No response. I took a few cautious steps forward, shining my flashlight into the tunnel ahead. The beam landed on a shallow puddle, ripples spreading across its surface as if something had just disturbed it. That's when I realized the air wasn't just cool, it was freezing. My breath came out in faint white puffs, and the flashlight flickered again. I tightened my grip on it, the metal suddenly cold against my palm. The thought hit me like a punch to the chest. I wasn't alone. I stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at the rippling puddle. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing louder than my thoughts. "It's nothing," I told myself, swallowing the lump in my throat. Maybe a drop of water had fallen from the ceiling. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. I took a shaky breath and pressed on. The wall seemed to close in as the tunnel narrowed, the light from my flashlight barely piercing the suffocating darkness. My boots splashed softly through shallow pools of water, but the sound no longer reassured me. There was something wrong here, something off. The carvings on the walls became more frequent. Strange symbols twisted and turned in ways that made my eyes ache if I looked at them too long. Some of the markings looked fresh, the grooves still sharp, as if someone or something had recently been here. Then I heard it again. A shuffle, faint but deliberate. This time, it wasn't ahead of me, it was behind. My blood ran cold as I turned, shining the flashlight back the way I came. The tunnel was empty, but the air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. "Hello?" My voice wavered, breaking the eerie silence. The echo that followed sounded warped, distorted, as if the cave itself was mocking me. I should have left. I knew I should have turned around and gotten the hell out of there. But the thought of walking back through that darkness, with something possibly following me, was worse than moving forward. At least ahead of me, there was the illusion of control. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, and for a moment, I felt relief. The space felt less suffocating, and I could stand upright without the jagged ceiling looming over me. My flashlight swept across the room, revealing stalagmites and stalactites that gleamed like teeth in the light. Then I saw it. At the far end of the chamber was a pile of rocks, or at least that's what I thought at first. But as I stepped closer, my stomach turned. It wasn't just rocks. It was bones. Human bones, arranged in a crude circle, with what looked like charred markings in the center. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I moved it across the grotesque display. A skull stared back at me, its hollow sockets seeming to follow my every move. My breath quickened, and I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. That's when I noticed the smell, an acrid metallic stench that burned my throat. It wasn't just decay, it was something deeper, something unnatural. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the wind, maybe air moving through the tunnels. But the sound grew louder, sharper, and undeniably human. Words in a language I couldn't understand, overlapping and echoing, filling the chamber with a maddening cacophony. I turned in circles, shining my flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. The whispers grew closer, louder, until it felt like they were right next to my ear. And then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. The silence was worse. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your skull, making you feel like you were drowning in it. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw it, a shape tall and hunched, standing at the edge of the light. When the beam stabilized, it was gone. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to move. I didn't care about the carvings, the bones, or the whispers anymore. I just needed to get out. But as I turned to retrace my steps, I realized with a sickening lurch that the water level was rising fast. The entrance was flooding. Panic surged through me as I ran back toward the tunnel, the water sloshing higher with every step. My breathing was ragged, my thoughts a jumbled mess of fear and desperation. But as I reached the narrow corridor, I froze. Standing in the center of the tunnel was the figure. Its form was hazy, almost translucent, but its presence was undeniable. Two burning eyes stared at me, unblinking, as if they were boring into my soul. And then it smiled. I couldn't breathe. That smile, it wasn't human. It stretched far too wide, teeth too sharp, shimmering faintly in the dim light of my flickering flashlight. My legs felt frozen, rooted in place by fear, while my brain screamed at me to run. The figure didn't move, but the air around it seemed to ripple, like heat rising off pavement. Those burning eyes locked onto me, and for a moment, I thought I could hear it in my head, a voice, or maybe hundreds of voices, speaking all at once. "You shouldn't be here." My heart slammed against my ribs. The words weren't spoken out loud, they were inside me, slithering through my mind like oil. Before I could process what was happening, the thing took a step forward. The water at its feet didn't ripple, it stilled, unnaturally calm, as if the cave itself obeyed its presence. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the slick ground. My flashlight flickered again, and this time, it died completely. The cave was plunged into darkness. "No, no, no," I hissed, fumbling with the flashlight, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I slapped it against my palm, praying for it to come back on. A faint click echoed in the blackness, and the beam sputtered to life, dimmer than before. The figure was gone. The relief was fleeting. The whispers returned, louder now, surrounding me from every direction. My breath came in shallow gasps as I spun the flashlight wildly, searching for any sign of it. The beam caught glimpses of the water, now waist-deep and rising quickly. I didn't care anymore about what was behind me or the cursed carvings on the walls. I had to get out now. I pushed forward through the water, which was ice-cold and dragged at my legs like it wanted to pull me under. Every step felt like a battle, and the whispers followed me, growing more frantic, more desperate. Then I heard it, a splash. Close. Too close. I spun around, the light shaking in my hand. Nothing. But the water rippled violently, as if something had just dived beneath the surface. "Leave me alone," I screamed, my voice echoing off the stone walls. The cave responded. A guttural growl reverberated through the tunnels, low and deep, making the walls tremble. It wasn't the whispers this time, it was something else. Something bigger. My panic turned to terror as the water surged higher, reaching my chest. I struggled to move, each step heavier than the last. My flashlight illuminated the tunnel ahead, but the path seemed endless, stretching far beyond what I remembered. Then I felt it. A hand. It grabbed my ankle, cold and wet, with fingers that felt impossibly long. I screamed, kicking frantically, and the grip loosened. The water around me churned violently, and for a moment, I thought I saw faces beneath the surface. Twisted, ghostly faces, mouths open in silent screams. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My body moved on pure instinct, pushing forward despite the exhaustion that clawed at me. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a deafening roar. Finally, I saw it, a faint glimmer of light. The entrance. The water was nearly up to my neck now, and I had to fight to keep my head above it. As I got closer, I realized the opening was smaller than I remembered, the rushing water narrowing the gap. I lunged forward, gripping the jagged edges of the cave's mouth and pulling myself through with every ounce of strength I had left. The water surged behind me, nearly dragging me back in, but I managed to collapse onto the muddy ground outside. For a moment, I just lay there, gasping for air, the rain pouring down around me. The whispers were gone, replaced by the sound of the storm. But then I felt it. A weight. Something stood over me, its presence as cold and oppressive as the cave itself. Slowly, I turned my head, the rain stinging my face. There it was, standing at the cave's mouth, silhouetted against the darkness. Those burning eyes stared down at me, and that smile, it hadn't faded. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't stop until I was far from the cave, drenched and shivering, the forest closing in around me. But even now, as I write this, I can still feel it watching. I didn't escape. Not really. Whatever was in that cave, it followed me. I thought I'd left it behind. After running through the storm-soaked forest and collapsing into my car, I told myself it was over. I locked the doors, started the engine, and sped down the winding roads without looking back. But even as the rain hammered against the windshield and the wipers struggled to keep up, I couldn't shake the feeling. That suffocating pressure, like unseen eyes, were fixed on me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I gripped it tighter. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those burning eyes staring back at me. The road behind me was empty, but I couldn't convince myself I was alone. When I finally reached my apartment, it was almost midnight. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air felt thick, like the storm wasn't entirely gone. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it, as if that would keep it out. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, my clothes still drenched and clinging to me. The silence in my apartment felt unnatural, as if the walls were holding their breath. I wanted to believe I was safe. I really did. But then, things started happening. It was small at first. My flashlight, which I'd tossed on the kitchen counter, flickered on its own. The dim light cut through the darkness of my apartment, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. I stared at it, frozen, until the light sputtered and died again. Then came the whispers. They were faint, almost indistinguishable from the hum of the fridge or the rain pattering against the windows. But as I stood there, straining to listen, they grew louder. Clearer. You brought it here. The voice was a low hiss, and it wasn't alone. Others joined in, overlapping, speaking in that same incomprehensible language I'd heard in the cave. My stomach turned, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over myself. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't real. It's just my mind. The stress. But it was real. The lights in my apartment flickered violently, casting the room in bursts of shadow and light. And then I saw it, just for a second. That figure. Standing at the edge of the hallway, tall and hunched, with eyes that burned like embers. I blinked, and it was gone. But the air in the room felt heavy, oppressive, like it was sinking into my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I locked myself in my bedroom, as if that flimsy door would do anything to protect me. My phone was clutched in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. What would I even say? I went into a cursed cave, and now something's following me? Instead, I sat there in the dark, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Hours passed. The whispers faded, and the apartment grew quiet again. Too quiet. Just as I started to think I could sleep, I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock on my bedroom door. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. It was calm, measured, as if whoever or whatever was on the other side was waiting patiently. My breath hitched, and I felt my heart stop. The knock came again. You shouldn't have left. The voice was right outside the door now, low and distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away and yet impossibly close. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. And then, the doorknob began to turn. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed with fear. The whispers returned, louder this time, filling the room until it felt like my skull was splitting. I closed my eyes, gripping my knees to my chest, and prayed for it to stop. When I finally opened them, the room was silent. The door was still closed, the knob untouched. But I knew better than to believe it was over. It wasn't. Even now, days later, I feel it. Watching. Waiting. Every time I turn off the lights, I catch glimpses of it in the shadows. And at night, when the world is silent, the whispers come back, reminding me of the mistake I made. I escaped the cave, but I didn't escape it. And I don't think I ever will. The whispers never stopped. They were always there, soft, insistent, burrowing into my mind no matter how hard I tried to drown them out. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped going outside. The world beyond my apartment felt irrelevant now because it was here with me. I tried everything to get rid of it. I burned sage, recited prayers, even screamed into the void like some desperate lunatic. None of it worked. The figure didn't need to appear anymore. Its presence was constant, like a shadow stitched to my very soul. One night, the whispers changed. I was sitting in the corner of my bedroom, flashlight in hand, rocking back and forth. It was all I could do to keep myself grounded. That's when I heard a single unmistakable word. Return. The voice was clearer than it had ever been, slicing through the air like a blade. My chest tightened, and I gasped for breath as the room seemed to darken around me. Return. I didn't need to ask what it meant. I knew. It wanted me to go back, to the cave. And as much as I hated myself for even considering it, I couldn't deny the pull. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. I don't remember how I got there. The drive back to the forest was a blur, my hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled determination. By the time I reached the cave, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. The entrance loomed before me, smaller than I remembered, almost like the earth itself was trying to swallow it whole. I didn't hesitate. The moment I stepped inside, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, pressing down on me like the weight of the cave itself. My flashlight illuminated the slick walls, the carvings that seemed to shimmer with faint, unnatural light. Deeper and deeper I went, retracing my steps as if I were in a trance. The water had receded, but the stench remained, a metallic tang that clung to my nostrils and made my stomach churn. Then I saw it. The chamber. The bones. The circle. But this time, something was different. The air felt alive, vibrating with a low hum that resonated deep in my chest. The markings on the walls glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. In the center of the circle, the figure waited. It was no longer hazy or translucent. It was solid, towering over me, its burning eyes fixed on mine. That horrible, too-wide smile stretched across its face as it raised one clawed hand, gesturing toward the center of the circle. No, I whispered, shaking my head. My legs trembled, but I couldn't move. You belong here now. The voice echoed in my mind, each word sending a jolt of pain through my skull. I tried to run, but my body refused to obey. My legs moved on their own, carrying me forward, step by agonizing step, until I was standing in the center of the circle. The whispers returned, louder than ever, rising to a deafening crescendo. My flashlight fell from my hand, clattering to the ground, its beam illuminating the skulls that surrounded me. Then the figure stepped forward. Its hand reached out, fingers impossibly long and sharp, and pressed against my chest. The cold that seeped into me was indescribable, an emptiness that spread through my entire body. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world around me faded, first the cave, then the whispers, then the light itself. All that remained was the figure and its burning eyes. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Months? Years? Time doesn't exist in this place. I can see the cave, but only from the outside now, like I'm watching through a foggy window. Sometimes, I see people wander inside, drawn by the same curiosity that brought me here. I try to warn them, to scream, to beg them to turn back, but they can't hear me. And when they step into the chamber, I'm there, waiting for them. I've become the thing I feared most. The cave didn't just take me, it made me part of it. Now, I'm the one who whispers. I'm the one who waits.